Okay, let's see if I can do a scene here without dropping my stamp like the last scene. But it was a good lesson in kind of making do with what happens during the course of the creation of a piece. Sometimes you gotta let them go in the direction that they seem to want to go, and with something like that I had to do a little bit of repair work. But it took me away from kind of something I was going for, which was kind of a more empty sky filled with light, okay? Having dropped my stamp, and I got a little bit of shadowing up in my sky area, I had to kind of fill it in with some, I don't know, filler stamps, something that would block out that texture that dropping the stamp gave me. So I'm a firm believer in just kind of going with what happens during a scene and just seeing what you can do with it. Alright, so this is the nature set number 10 that I'm using. I'll use, a few of the stamps. I don't think I'll use them all. I colored it black dye-based ink. Kind of tinted the top of it, or I don't know, accented, maybe that's the right word, with a little bit of green up there, which gives me a bit of a varied color scheme. I don't know if you can see that little tinge of green up there, so it's not quite all black. It's fairly dark because I want it to stand up against, the other colors that I'm going to lay down on it, but you could do browns and greens in those trees themselves. A lot of people kind of aren't used to coloring on stamps anymore, and getting the color in the actual impression where, I think a lot of stamps out there are outlines, so you're used to stamping things out and then coloring them in. But a lot of us kind of that have been stamping for a long time, there were designs like Posh Impressions and things like that out there, and D. Grunig doing really bold impressions and doing a lot of color mixing directly onto the stamp, and that's kind of how I learned to do it. We were doing a lot of producing a lot of eraser carved style stamps at a Stamp in Hand, where I worked before I started my own company, and I spent a lot of time indexing their stamps, when we were working in production, making the stamps for the company, and I spent a lot of time just kind of mixing colors on the stamps and going for those impressions. We didn't used to have, do something where you stamp it out and color it in afterwards. You might add color to it later, but for the most part, it was all within the impressions. Okay. All right, so this is how you kind of start off with your, just your basics of scene building, compositions. We have all these different designs. Now I could have brought that closer to the chapel if I wanted to, but I left them separate. I just wanted that around there. I could use more trees, in the background here if I want to. I just mask that off a little bit. We can build up a little bit more of a forest. I don't know, maybe I'll do something like that, I'm not sure. But let's do something where we fill in. Let me find a good size block for this. I have cling foam versions of these stamps, but we also have them in just bare rubber. Okay, now this right here, I think I'll go for some green. Yeah, one of these greens would probably do it. Pear Tart's probably a little bit too light. I like that one for green. This one is Jungle Green Marvy, so basically a mid-tone green. Use whatever you have. Okay, so it would match up a little bit better if I stamped it in black, but I'm going to have this area down here lighter, okay? Yeah, maybe that's too light. Maybe I will go for some deeper impressions, okay? Light even pressure, overlap your previous impressions so that everything merges together really nicely. So we have something like that. I think I'll bring in a little bit of brown or something. Let's go for a dark brown. I have a Marvy dark brown here. So I'll do a little mixing of colors. Now we're going to bring a lot more color into this though. So this will not just be it, okay? You don't see a big slathering of brown because this is a very light and airy stamp, but I am getting some of that color in there, which will go nicely with the greens that we apply down here. Okay. I tell you what, let's go back to what I was talking about before. Let's go with this tree again, the tree cluster small. Okay, oops. All right, now here, let me show you a little trick. Okay, well, let's go with dark brown here. And what I'll do is I'll bring in some green. I'll go a little bit more green on this one than I did on the previous one. The other one was a little bit more of an accent. This one will be a little bit more obvious with the green. All right, here's what we're going to do here. We're going to take this. I've done this in a lot of different videos. It's kind of selective impressions, okay? I'm taking a good amount of that ink off the bottom right here, okay? Really wiping it off good. I almost want none of it. Then as I move up, I'm pressing into the stamp less. Can you see that right there, where there's a removal of ink? I don't want a complete removal up here, and then I'll just transition it so it's going from wet to dry down here, but not just wet, dry with a sudden cutoff. It's kind of transitioning. I'm taking off more off the bottom, and then as I move up, I'm using less pressure here, like this. So it's very delicate right here, and then quite a bit down here, okay? Now when we do something like that, it's pretty dry down here, right? So I can just stamp it right in here, and I should get this transitioning darker to lighter version down here. Now I didn't ink it up in black, I inked it up in a lighter color to begin with, so it should look like it recedes, you know, in the distance a little bit. Yeah, a little bit more brown than green, but not too bad. Let's do that again. Looks like a California in the drought, you know, tree back there. All right, let me try to use a little bit more green. This green is pretty dry, so I think that's why it didn't really apply much. Okay, let's go like this. Okay, same thing right here. Let's transition it. Wipe it off pretty good. I didn't even ink it up down here. I didn't want any ink down there. Okay, a little bit more on the bottom. A little bit less in the middle, okay? And then kind of wet up there. Okay, let's go roughly about like so. Hopefully this looks like it's in the background. Like that. It's a little bit lighter. I can probably even go for another impression right in here. Let's try it. It's a little bit more brown than I wanted, but oh well. How about that? That looks pretty good. So, it looks a little bit, you know, deeper in terms of space in here. All right. I think that's what we'll use from our, well, let's go with this Clivus Sun as well. I was thinking about this kind of general composition here. Let's do a kind of a lighter sky, you know, like high noon or something like that. I'll go with kind of a mid-tone blue for my sun. A lot of you are thinking, well, the sun should be yellow, shouldn't it? Well, when you go out at noontime, or whatever, you know, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., 3 p.m., 4 p.m., you know, the sun's usually not yellow. That's kind of more of a sunrise, sunset type of color. When it's a little bit lower on the horizon. Or, I don't know, if there's like there's dust or something like that, you know, you're looking at the sun through a bunch of dust or fog or something like that. Pollution, smog. It would be more of that color, but we're just going to do kind of a neutral blue. I really damped it around the edge so that it fades out on the edge. So it'll fade into the surrounding area nice and gracefully. Hopefully, we'll see. Okay, See that right there? It's just a very light image, but it's because I stamped it in kind of a medium tone, but then this is just kind of made up of little dots. If you want it more dramatic, then stamp it in something darker, like a dark blue, or if you're doing a sunset, do it in a dark brown, red, whatever. All right, so let's start the fun here, and let's start defining some lighting within this scheme, within this composition here. Coming up with a lighting scheme for it, okay? All right, now, on my previous video, I just used a wadded up paper towel to do my toning. I really want these scenes and techniques to be very accessible to everyone, no matter what media you have. Now, I am working on a piece of glossy cardstock right here, but you can use a matte cardstock for this exact same composition right here, in this exact same method that I'll be using on here. Memento Summer Sky. Just a light blue, ink up like that. See this little wad of paper towel? So there's not a lot of, well, there's a little bit of a crease up there. I want it generally to be pretty flat though, okay? And I'm starting off with a very light tone, okay? You can kind of dab around like that. You can smear it in, whatever. Now, if the sun is there, just in terms of a general concept, we want that sun to be nice and light. Well, how do you do that? A lot of people's inclination is to, okay, this is a sky up here. Let's fill it all in. Here's grass right here. Let's fill it all in. Okay, I'm going to teach you how to color for lighting as opposed to coloring for filling, okay? So around my sun, I'm retaining the area right around my light because that is the thing that's casting the light. You see how this blue filled up the rest of the sky, okay? Now, what do we have with light in a given scenario? I have my lights over my desk here. Well, I have my lights coming in from over my desk, and this is being illuminated right here, right? I mean, look at my hand. My hand has darks and lights on it. It just depends on wherever your lighting is. You don't have to know anything about lighting, though, okay? Because this is what I do here. We have an area of light here, and just leave an area of light somewhere down on your surface right here. Now, just in general, I tend to put some coloring underneath the trees. You're saying, wait a minute, you're putting blue down there, though. Well, what's green made out of? It's made out of blue and yellow, right? So why not use your lighter blue down here? I mean, if you have all greens, you can certainly use them, but when you use some of the color that you used in your sky down on the ground, it'll bring continuity to those two areas. I could put it here and there, like about like so, but do you see what I did? This little area down here is kind of the same open light area. You'll see it a little bit more the darker I go, okay? Can you see the darker I go, the more that little area of light starts to stand out? Doesn't it look like there's lighting down there now? It's as simple as that. Just don't color in the whole thing, okay? Now, I know what a lot of people end up doing when they first start doing this type of process right here, okay? Let's use a little bit of a darker. Let's go back to the Bahama blue that we stamped our sun in, okay? I'm going to do that before I move into my greens because I'm going to use the same little applicator for my greens, okay? So what I do with this one right here is I just kind of bring it in like so. And see, this is transitioning from darker to lighter because this is our light source. So it gets darker as it moves farther away from it, okay? Use just a very light touch. Don't use a real heavy hand, okay? I'm barely touching my paper, okay? Think of it as though you're applying makeup on a child's face or something like that, or your own face. You're not going to scrub it on like this, onto someone's face. you're just going to lightly dab around, okay? Where do we hit this darker tone down here? How about some shadows down here, okay? Like this, see that? Let's put it under these trees. Doesn't it look like the light is now casting a shadow down here? You know, it's kind of forming that shadow. Alright, see that kind of lighting down there? A lot of people will fill up this. They say grass is green, so they just green right here, but then they've lost all their light, okay? Alright, let's go to some Pear Tart. Just some lighter green. Ink up right on your applicator. Start toning in. Going into my meadow down here. Where I go over my blue, it no longer looks blue. It looks kind of more of a aqua, darker green to me. And I can go into some of that. Sometimes it's too white, so I'll bring some of this lighter tone into it. But look at this tone that I'm bringing in. It's super light, isn't it? And that's what bothers people a lot of times. They say, oh my god, you make it look so easy, because they're going like this. They're inking up, and they're coming in like that, right? And they're saying, oh my god, it's so hard. But this is what I'm doing right here. I'm just coming in with these really light shades like that, okay? Look how much control you have over it. You can add down as much as you want, as light as you want. Just don't make it so wet on your applicator, and just take your time. Look at this, it's like buffing it into it, right? We're not doing like, you know, like Chinese calligraphy or something like that on our faces, right? If we're applying, you know, makeup, you know. For me, it would be Halloween makeup, because I don't wear makeup, but if you're putting some, you know, makeup on a kid's face, you know, you're just kind of lightly going on. I'm talking about like cold pack, you know, or something like that. Not that we all do that, but there you have it, okay? Now, the darker you go, I start focusing more kind of in my shadow areas like this, okay? It starts to anchor down the scenes a little bit, you know, the imagery with kind of opacity. It says that, you know, those images are casting a shadow. I like to make a little bit of a vignette around the edges, kind of with some of my darker tones, but look at that. So that lighting really standing out. It looks like that light is coming down here and hitting that. And that's what's really kind of fun to watch develop. It doesn't develop so quickly. It's not this instant type of thing. We're used to kind of coloring, you know, certain areas, you know, like this, and we can see it fill in. But when people are working with something like this, it's kind of a little bit more of a, you know, gradual process that they're not used to. They're expecting to get the full saturation color of a palette like that, but that's not what we're working with. We're working in the various tones of it, but I mean, you can see right here, it doesn't take a long time to do. You just kind of build it up a little bit like this, okay? It's like you're buffing in that color, right? And when you do it like that, you're not going to get like hard edges like that or something showing, okay? It's what everyone, it's kind of a mindset, you know. When I'm coloring here like this, I'm watching what that's doing to this open area down here, where normally the types of coloring that you're doing, you're looking at the color being applied and not how it relates to that outside area. When you're doing it for lighting, you're kind of watching as you get a little bit darker here. This area, by contrast, becomes a little bit lighter, so you're kind of watching that as it develops. Okay, now grasses often, for me, look a little bit too greenish tinge. Now, see my brown in there is starting to really help this, otherwise it's just, you know, all these kind of lime, kind of electric greens. Distress inks are really good for this. Real kind of earthy brown tones, okay? So this, as I go underneath my trees there, it becomes a little bit more of a this earthy toned grass area. that. I can even go into my chapel if I want to, and maybe bring that a little tinge in there. See, on the side of that chapel, kind of right here, I've made a shadow because, well, where do you know how to put shadows? Well, when I draw these designs, there are certain areas that are darker to begin with. See that little side area right there, and that steeple area. But you just kind of reiterate, unless you have the sun over here and then it's shining on that side of the chapel. But you just go like that, and it's, that's pretty much done. Let me see if I can get this little applicator a little narrower to get a little bit. Yeah, that worked pretty good. I just kind of squeeze this over to get in kind of more of a detailed area. Now, I use stylus tools for the most part, but like I said, paper towels work great. I used a used kitchen sponge once that was, just shredded, but I just want to make a point that you can really kind of make do with things. You don't have to kind of depend on, having exact media. I mean, there's certain media-specific things. You can't do like a oxide ink, background with, watercolors or something like that. Yeah, but in terms of like things like applicators and things of that sort, I don't know, make do. I've used cotton balls, in another video just to show, what can be done with that. Well, there's all kinds of things you can do. Okay, so that is colored in like so. Oh, this is what I always forget. Let's grab some pens here. You guys have a lot of these, pens, brush pens, alcohol pens, La Plume, watercolor pens, dye pens, all kinds of things. This one right here, pen probably cost about 50 cents each, for a dual tipped one. It's an alcohol pen, works great. This one's by Shuttle Art. Okay, but you can go in and you can get a little more detailed areas with things like this. I like to use very light versions of pens, but this can get in those little tight, harder to reach areas. I like to kind of define some shadows, so let's see what colors we have here. Kind of come down in here underneath my trees. It's a little bit too dark, I think. So I just go to a much lighter version of it. Green, right? Now if you're working on matte, you can't really blend these around, but if you're working on glossy, you can kind of spread them out. But if you're working on matte, just, I don't know, start off with kind of duller, lighter colors, okay? The ones that aren't so bright. With glossy, it gives you a chance to kind of move it around still and to fine-tune it. There's this tree in the background. Maybe I'll get a little bit more tone on that one. Where do you do it? Do it in shadows, okay? You can see the darker areas of the designs, okay? And you just go in there and add a little bit more lighter tone to those shadow areas. See that right there? Doesn't it kind of anchor down that area right in there a little bit more? Okay, you can come in here, there's little shadows on the Sedge Filler stamp. You can kind of reiterate some of that and go for a little bit more of a, I don't know, a full look, and saturated too. Okay, so there's something of that right there. I'm just thinking about stamping a quote in here. In the woods we return to reason and faith. If I did that, I would stamp it right over the top of that sun. Maybe I will, okay? I just kind of want to go for a little bit more of a varied composition, varied composition. Just thinking about this, I want to get this nice and straight across here. Sometimes when I stamp this out, I'm not using a positioner, I just kind of eyeball it. Sometimes it's at a little bit of a slant one way or another. I know it's not going to be at 45 degrees or something like that, but we'll see what I can do. I'm just going to stamp this out in just black. this off the Scenic Sentiments Sheet. Let's see, do I want to center that? I think maybe I'll move this a little bit over to the side here. Let me do a test print, actually. Okay. Oops, that's dark brown. Here's the black. I was really proud of my typography on that one, in terms of the text and the spacing. I agonize over like micromillimeters of an inch between the spacing on here, because it's going back to my college days of taking lettering on typography from the head of the graphic arts department, or graphic design, and he was tough. I was up for hours working on every project, hand lettering things. These days, we would just do it all on computer, but you had to have everything perfect. All right, so how's that look right there? Kind of makes it, you know, when you enter kind of text into a piece, it really changes the spirit of it, doesn't it? I always love kind of the marriage of text and visuals within a piece that has its own art form to it. Working with text and what were all those terms, leading and tracking and all that stuff. We used to set type in high school. With our letterpress work. It was actually working with steel type. I feel really old when I talk about something like that, but they still had it in my high school, doing things like that. You know, and it was really fun. Okay, so anyway, this is just some Hero Hues, white pigment ink, okay, Unicorn. Use whatever brand you want. Brilliance dries a little bit too fast, so don't use that. But just about any other kind of white pigment ink. Okay, we have areas that are light up here, right? Light, light, light. If you've kept, you know, retained it. I just said retain like 2 areas in general, but you could have done more. Okay, but let's see what this does here, okay? Now, here's what people do with that ink application that I was talking about before. They try to ink up too fast, and it becomes a little bit more of a precarious exercise, you know? You get this big blotch there, and it's, you know, really pronounced, right? We don't want that, you know, we want... I think I just completely took it up. But see that right there? That really light version of it. That's what you want. And then you build up your colors, okay? Well, that being said, we don't want a big blob of white pigment ink on our scene either, okay? So you just kind of dab in like this, and then dab off a little bit, you know. You can dab it off onto a black piece of paper to... This is my little, you know, visual piece where I can see it, how much ink is on something. I don't necessarily want a lot of ink. I want it that control right there. So when I start applying it, it's just kind of a very light version. And watch out, because your white pigment ink pad is probably really super juicy. So, okay, so anyways, let's see what this does here. Okay. All right, Kevin, keep the field of view within the camera. Correct. Okay, so watch this. See that really light dabbing right there? See what it's doing to that tree? I'm not dabbing it over the whole thing. I'm kind of dabbing it where light meets dark. And I think that looks like kind of lighting hitting that tree, okay? We have this little area back here. And that could be kind of like a little mist or something. Look at that. See, that light is now kind of coming around this tree in the form of some mist or something. Okay, let's come up from down here in this lighting. Let's put a little bit of a kind of morning fog or mist kind of on the... the ground. There's this kind of a glorious illumination, you might say. And I find that this kind of little technique right here, see, I can barely see it, right? But then as you start coming out here into the darker areas, white will stand out much more, right? Barely put it on. Now see, this is where people get really impatient too. They go like this. And it's like, oh, I can't see anything. So they go like that, you know, like that. And it's like, oh my God, I'm getting blobs. Why am I getting that? Well, it's just, it's kind of a controlled, okay, application. Now, if you're doing this on the glossy, it'll just buff out, okay? Don't worry about it. That's why I don't use Brilliance ink for this. It dries instantly. Okay, but here we go. And I really purposely just jab that down there really hard. Okay, it's not like this precarious, delicate exercise. You're just lightly dabbing it, okay? Think of this one as though you're putting makeup on an infant's face, you know, a little baby or something like that. Okay? Think about that kind of touch like that. When you're applying color, maybe it's like applying makeup to like a, you know, third grader's face or something like that. But this one right here, just go really lightly. And just, if you want more of it, then dab more. What happens is people go like this, and like I said, they don't see anything happening. It's very, very gradual, but all you do is you just stay there for a few seconds. It's not like it's going to take 30 seconds, you know. Listen to this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so it's like 5 seconds that, you know, you don't have to rush things, okay? But see, like that, I don't know. Let's put a little mist out this way. It's like creeping around or whatever. It's this illumination coming from this sun up here in the sky. Let's put some on this side of this tree. See that right there? But look at what it looks like as a whole now. Isn't that a really full looking piece in terms of all that lighting and atmosphere in there? And it, I mean, this pigment ink doesn't take a long time to do either. I don't know, it probably would have taken a minute and a half for such a significant change. Now, I say a minute and a half because I'm talking, you know, talking instructional wise, but see this little top of that tree right next to the sun? Look at that now. Isn't that fun? How it kind of bathes it in kind of light now. But I like to oscillate it. I like to have some areas crisp and some areas kind of more diffused with that light. I'm keeping the chapel largely in focus, you know, as opposed to this foggy kind of illumination, but I don't know, you can just kind of be the judge of it. Always hold it out at arm's distance to get a feel of what your piece is looking like. Now, that being said, I find that when my inks dry, my pigment ink dries, dye inks tend to dry lighter. Pigment inks tend to dry darker, so you have to kind of apply a little bit more than you think you'll need, because when it dries up, the images will be showing through that white pigment ink a little bit more distinctly. So it's like, oh wait, what happened to my pigment ink? Okay, you know, you can't see it. Just add a little bit more, or you can wait for it to dry and see what it looks like. Okay, and one of the things I always thought would look kind of cool is if we put some of this, you know, on lettering. Let's have the lettering being affected as well by some of that light. So that R is really close to my sun, right? Let's have some of those, a little bit of an interaction between that text and the light. See how it's hitting that? It's just subtle. I don't want to fog out a lot of it, but let's just go with that. Okay, now, one thing about laying down pigment ink down here, it's kind of hard to stamp over it, but I'm finding that, I think, I'm still learning about it, but I think I can get an impression using a hybrid ink. The VersaFine might work too, but sometimes when I did the VersaFine over some white pigment ink before, it kind of showed through, so I'm not sure. But let me try some of this hybrid black ink that I've been kind of experimenting around with this last week. Let me see if I can get some kind of darker foreground imagery in here. It'll kind of give us a more woodsy type of feel too if I kind of utilize some more trees here in the foreground too, kind of to go along with the quote stamp. By kind of doing these darker trees here in the foreground, it gives the whole scene a little bit more contrast and visual depth. I'm just using the same tree here too, because I want to stick to the set, except for the quote was from a different set, but I just want to go with that to show you that using value, okay, relative light and dark, can give you a lot of depth. One of the things that would give us a lot of depth is if we had different size trees, but this, to me, using value looks like near, dark, farther, lighter, and then the ones that are way in the background are the lightest. So that gives you your depth. We're not working with scale here, but it kind of gives you a little bit of an illusion of scale by just having kind of some darker objects, a repetition of imagery in the foreground right here. And the higher you go up, it represents things that are farther back in the distance right there. But I don't know, nature set number 10. Fun stuff. Oh, I always forget something. There's all this different media that I like to use. I always tell people, don't get so caught up in, it's like, well, what do you use for your scenes? Do you use this ink or do you use this ink? Well, why not use the different inks for what they're really great at? There's dye-based inks on here. There's alcohol inks on here for the tighter details. Oh, by the way, that alcohol inks would be great, for, real specific areas. I can get underneath the eaves, or I can get on the side of that chapel like that, right? You can kind of hit the shadows with pens, right? This is a perfectly great tool, conducive for detailed areas like that, or adding on color. What else do we use? We used pigment ink on here for that real frosty type of look, like so. And because, see, if I stamp these out in black before I added the pigment ink, if I added pigment ink on here, the pigment ink would cover these, and those would get lighter in some areas, which could look good too. But I wanted these to be nice and just crisp. But stamping over pigment ink with a dye-based ink, it doesn't really work that well. It doesn't stick. So, like a pigment ink, I think the VersaFine would look, pretty good here. I didn't have too thick of a coverage with the pigment ink, but I don't know, the hybrid ink works pretty good. Hybrids are a mixture of both pigment and dye, so kind of fits in there nicely. Okay, so let's go with this Miaosun. I'm butchering that name, I'm sure. Let's go with some little highlights in here, okay? White gel pen or white paint pen would be great for that. Isn't that fun though? So it's not like, okay, wait, I used dye-based inks, so I can't use these inks or something like that, or I used whatever ink and I can't use this other one. Use your media and for whatever it's the most conducive for within a given piece. You can use it, mix and match. I mean, I don't really think of myself as in terms of a multimedia, but I mean, essentially you are doing that type of thing. I just see it as I don't know. I just see it as using whatever works in a given area. I don't set out to, purposely use multimedia or something like that. in a given piece, but you know, I guess it is. Let me put these light beams coming from those rays like that. It gives it a little bit of dimension. Oh, you can even add some to the clouds. You have that silver lining clouds. It's not silver, it's white, but it usually probably means the lighting that's reflecting off all these little parts of it. I was actually able to get that fairly straight. I'm often off a little bit. I tend to stamp kind of at an angle. I really notice it when I'm doing photos. If I didn't, I have to use my level, digital level on at all times. Otherwise, all of my pieces are kind of slanting in a certain way. Alright, so that's a little pearly everlasting up there. I don't know, that's the name of this flower. I don't know, it's just white, I don't know what it is. But, oh, let's see. Gosh, I haven't used these in a really long time. This is a Lavender Sharpie paint pen. Let's see if I can even get this going. It has this, one of those little shaker things inside. Oh, there it goes. I just released it. That kind of rattling around in there. It's one of those types of pens. I haven't used this in a really long time. It's probably months. Let's see if it's still working. Okay, let me see. It's trying. It's probably really dry on the tip there. God, it's all crusted. Okay. This looks really good. Kind of purple looks really good in green. It's like I want to say lavender, not lavender, but lupine. So here we have a paint pen, or another paint pen. So it's, what do you use to do your scenes with? Well, paint pens, alcohol inks, hybrid inks, dye inks, whatever you have around. You can do it all in one. You don't have to bring everything into it, but kind of those little details like that are really fun. And see, you can see that shadow underneath there, where it got a little bit darker with the alcohol pens, right? Then of course we have all of the pigment ink kind of running through here. Do you see how that pigment ink came into play against our multi-valued impressions? Just take off some ink, you know, off the bottom of it. Go for, you know, the second impression of it to represent things that are farther back in the distance. And you can get really, you know, a lot of mileage out of the inks that you have by using less of them on some of your impressions, okay? It makes it look really deep in terms of the value there. All kinds of different colors in the grass, all blended together, and the retention of light, because I just didn't tone it all out. I'm using kind of a really dry brush application of it and just doing multiple passes. Alright, so anyways, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, drop me a note in the comment section.